Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. With us on the program today, we're continuing our pursuit down ballot. We're meeting with JD Scholten. He, unlike some of our previous candidates, he's gotten past his primary. We're going into a general election, and we want to make sure that he's in the position to properly take down the Republican this fall and Randy Feenstra. So you know what? JD is going to be coming on today. I look forward to talking policy as we always do and strategy, but I really want to hear what it's going to take for us to overcome and get him into office. I'm really looking forward to this. Let's get into it. Okay, we got JD here. How you doing, JD?
I'm great. I love the intro. This is cool.
Yeah, man.
You got.
It's a pleasure to have you on today. I'm really looking forward to getting to know your whole platform and what it's going to take to really get everyday Americans' lives improved. But I think we have to understand a little bit about yourself. I think some people are late to the game here and they need to know why they should be supporting you today as a person. What were you doing before you decided to become a congressional candidate in Iowa?
Yeah, so after college, most of my 20s I spent playing minor league baseball, and I was blessed to play all over the country, and then I played in about 7 different countries as well. And so after baseball days, I worked in about a decade as a paralegal, and ultimately, when the 2016 election happened, I think it caused a lot of people to really check in with politics and themselves, and what are they doing, and are they doing enough to have change. And I saw what happened here in Iowa and across the nation. And ultimately, I decided to go to my grandma's my inspiration in my life. She's one of the most amazing people I ever met. And Grandma Fern at Thanksgiving in 2016, I talked to her and ultimately, about right before I had to leave, she goes, JD, you need to take care of the farm. And here in Iowa, we're in the 4th district, we're the second most agriculture producing district in America. And having come back here and just seeing how the economy is, seeing how things, a lot of different things. When I moved back several years ago to my hometown, this is my childhood home for my parents that I ended up buying. And when I moved back here, the best job I could find after looking for a month in my hometown paper was $15 an hour and no benefits. And when I had my high school class reunion a couple years ago, the majority of the kids I graduated with are doing great things, but they're not doing it here. And just a lot of things just kind of led up for this moment. And then at the time when we launched last cycle, we were up against Steve King, who kind of has the national name. And we took this race that nobody thought we had a chance. And we just started this grassroots movement. I literally got in my car, went to every county, all 39 counties, at least 3 times. Eventually, we raised enough money to buy a used RV, a Winnebago RV. They're made in my district, threw the logo on the side, and just went nonstop. And we moved the needle 24 points, which was 3rd most in the nation. And it was cool to see this organic grassroots movement. I know grassroots gets used a lot these days, but like to see something where no one thought we had a chance. And then ultimately, because of us and because we decided to run again, King lost his primary because they saw the challenge and they thought, you know what, we need to go in a different direction. And so here we are today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things I'd love to drill in there. The first of which is I wanted to understand what has been kind of keeping this economic condition where, people have had this brain drain as a concept where people are no longer staying. What are some of those issues in your district that is keeping them away? Is it just the job opportunities, or is it a cost problem where it's just not feasible to stay there and have a prosperous life as easily?
Well, the cost problem is not the issue because, we're one of the best places to live. If you, the Democratic Party loves to talk about raising the minimum wage. Mm-hmm. I'm 100% for that. But ultimately what this district needs are those $60,000, $70,000 and $80,000 jobs. Those are game changers. And in having worked in technology a little bit and seeing the potential of what we could do here, that is what ultimately excites me about what we can do to change. I talk all the time about the new rural economy, and I think one of the first things that we need to do is address the monopolization problem we have in the agriculture industry. You look at, I mean, this pandemic has put a spotlight on it, and you look at these meat packers, and ultimately consumers are paying the most they ever have. The workers are not being safe, or not being put in a safe condition, and they're getting paid the same wage. When we moved here, when I was 4 years old in 1984, we moved from the other side of the district to here in Sioux City, and the wages were the same exactly what they are today, 4 decades later. And the third part of it is they're squeezing farmers, and it just, you see how the beef industry, four corporations control 85% of the market, and they're using that monopoly power even today. Today, the USDA launched, or they reported their investigation on price fixing and things that have been reported in the past year. And the interesting thing was that the lobbyist for the Packers and the Cattlemen's Association, which is buddies with the Packers, both of them released their statement before the USDA even announced the end of the investigation. I mean, that is a nutshell of how corrupt DC can be, and that's one of the things. Ultimately, it hurts a district like this because it's squeezing farmers, and then when the farmer doesn't have money, he can't go into town to spend it at the bar or the grocery store or wherever as much as he or she would like, and then that depresses the town economy, and then it depresses the bigger size towns, and so on and so forth. And so I feel that what we need to do is a 3-step approach. One, we need to enforce our antitrust laws, which are already on the books. And then 2, bring in technology on a much grander scale to really have that dream of where we want to go as an economy and as a nation. And then the third part is really, for pennies on the dollar, we can invest in regional food hubs that can not only, we can create the infrastructure for that by having farm to school, farm to nursing home, farm to prison, farm to military, and then that just allows farmers to enable themselves and empower themselves.
Yeah, no, I love a lot of those parts. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper on that point. The second you brought up of technology, what are some of those technologies that you think we should be incentivizing? And do you see the federal role of subsidizing those things? Is it regulating to encourage certain practices? What is really the technology front that you hope to bring to agriculture?
Yeah, I think the next big wave of the Iowa economy is going to be in agriculture technology. And we need to create the infrastructure in place. And I mean, you look at this pandemic right now, and as rural hospitals are struggling to stay open, telemedicine is going to be much more of an issue and in the need in a district like this district. And you talk about like kids not going to school or virtual learning. Well, that's not doable in some parts of this district. And we got to create an even level for everyone, so they have the capability of doesn't matter what your zip code is, you should have the capability to have quality internet to excel in life. And I mean, you look at the amount of money we spent as a nation. I think it was $48 billion in Afghanistan last year. For that same amount, we could cover every American with high quality internet. And I think that is something that if we're going to have that vision of the future and where we want to go with the economy, I think it's a necessity.
I'd love to actually pry on that last point you were making. I'm not sure if you had heard the most recent votes that had come through Congress. They had the bills to set up the framework to help the withdrawal from Afghanistan, as well as a vote of an amendment to actually start defunding slightly 10% the Pentagon budget. I wanted to know what you thought of the fact that both the Democratic Party and Republican Party rejected that, what you would have thought of those types of proposals, and what is a foreign policy you would try to aim for as a representative.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that we need to make sure that we have a fully funded military and that we're safe. There's no doubt about that. But then you look at things in the military right now, like they don't, the U.S. military doesn't even have a chef. They outsource everything.
Yeah.
And so when you have that type of consulting and or different third party entities, the prices get jacked up, and ultimately that's on us. That's on the taxpayer. And so, I mean, we're graduating high school kids who have never lived in time of peace, and I think that is wrong. And so, I'm tired of these never-ending wars when we could be investing in ourselves. I mean, you look at how we're going to challenge a nation like China. Economically, it can't just be the coast. It can't just be Silicon Valley versus China. It can't just be urban areas versus China. Every district in America should have a part to play. And what I feel is like if we can excel in a district like the 4th Congressional District in Iowa, we could be the epicenter for 21st century resilient agriculture and resilient economy, and it will allow us to really, as a nation that is will have a lot less people versus China, but we can compete economically because we have all the machines running. But right now, we don't have that. Excuse me, we don't have that vision of and that plan to really take on a nation like that right now.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It is becoming, as you said, very a coastal affair in terms of the technology front. That's been a big battle in terms of cybersecurity, which is where most of our interaction with these foes are coming from. We haven't had a lot of hand-to-hand or air strikes with some of these larger players. It's been economic, it's been intellectual property, and so I do think we need to have the whole nation united on these fronts. Exactly. What do you think are some of the things that we could be doing on a representation level to help further that along? Obviously, talk to foreign policy with agricultural policy on that. Don't want to confuse it with the foreign policy, but what do you think else can be done from places like Iowa to help support this front of being more competitive on the global scale? Is it just a revitalization of agriculture, or are there other jobs that you'd hope to bring into the district?
Well, I think one of the things that we really need to address, and this pandemic has done a really a good job spotlighting it, is food security. In order to be a secure nation, we need to be a food secure nation. And what this pandemic has shown is if we go down, if one of the meat packing plants go down, it disrupts the whole market. And we're becoming more and more relying on foreign entities. I mean, you look at PPEs and ventilators and how the dependent we are on China for some of these things. I mean, when I talk about enforcing our antitrust laws, there's not a better story, or I guess a worse story, than we had a plan for ventilators in case something like this happened, in case a global pandemic happened. And what happened was a medical device, multinational medical device company bought the entity that there was this company down in Southern California, I think around San Diego, that was committed to, in case of a global pandemic, they were going to set aside their production and create ventilators on a mass production to help with US. Well, this huge medical device company did a merged, and then they killed it off, and it was a killer acquisition is what it's called. And you see things like that. That doesn't benefit us as a society. And so when it comes about the economics of where we should be and how we compete, we can't just it can't just all be about the bottom dollar and profiteering. And that's honestly, like in agriculture right now, you look at who's profiting, and especially these last few months in the pandemic, the dairy industry, beef industry, bacon, all of those things, farmers have gotten less pennies on the dollar than any other time, and they're continuing. The market share of the consumer dollar, less than 15 cents, makes it back to the farmer, which is all-time low. And we're just going in the wrong direction in a lot of these things. And so it just, I mean, you even look at the Bezos, and he made $13 billion just the other day alone. I mean, that's
high.
right, right. And at the same time, they paid $0 in federal taxes. Just think, Amazon did. And so, I mean, it's just unfair. I paid federal taxes last year. I paid a lot. and it's just, it's about investing in America. And I don't think we are doing that in a proper way. Like when we continue to invest in Afghanistan, we invest in other areas. When are we going to start investing in districts like the 4th District of America or 4th District of Iowa?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's sometimes tiresome when you get this very, let's just say, inconsistent use of corporate personhood. They don't want to pay their taxes, clearly, but they want to reap some of the extra speech benefits. That's been one of the big themes that we try to drive here at the show is tactics and how do we reform our democracy? Because I think we all acknowledge there's a lot of these good ideas that are out there, and we feel like there's a lot of, well, frankly, there's some polarization, but also just the system not being designed well to be human focused. What do you think could be done to improve government itself to be more, representative, efficient, and trustworthy?
I get asked all the time, like, if I could do one thing, what could you do? And once you're elected, and I talk about healthcare every day. I talk about enforcing our antitrust laws. We talk about climate change, like all these things. But the one force that continually runs against it is special interest and the amount of money. Like, it is insane that I have to raise millions of dollars for a race that I'm going to have to win. If I win, I'm going to have to run again in a couple of years. And in doing so, when you win, you go to DC and you spend the majority of your time fundraising. And if we got to take that off the table, there's no incentive of when you're in DC of getting stuff done. And what, if anything, there's almost incentive not to get stuff done the way things are set up now. So if we can get a system where we can get campaign finance reform or get, have some, make sure that lobbyists aren't buddies so much with what's happening. I mean, like I mentioned about what USDA today, and like, when all the lobbyists are writing the bills and dictating what's happening, it's hurting our democracy. And of our three things, I have three pillars that I talk about every day: fix, fight, and secure. It's fix healthcare, fight for an economy that works for everyone, and then secure our democracy. And that secure our democracy is from the special interests, because they're dictating it right now.
Yeah, I so wholeheartedly agree. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the right approach to actually tactically get that done as a representative? Because I've seen some of the things are against the incentives of some of the politicians, because they're like, well, this is the system I won on. So this is the system that can keep me secure. How do you think tactically as a representative you would try to bring this issue to others to rally around? I know we got HR1 through. What's the next step to doing more democracy reform on top of that when we're still waiting for the Senate to pass that? Hopefully you all will reintroduce that, because I'm a little cynical. I don't think Mitch McConnell's going to bring it forward for a vote this year. So you'll bring that forward. But what do you want to do to build on top of that type of work? What are some of the top things that you think, okay, we need to have this essentially? There are going to be other things that are going to get probably tossed out in the pile because that's just the nature of Congress. But what are the top things that start really saying, okay, the people are in charge of the direction of this country?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we can do. I think just having the caucus here in Iowa, and we won't talk about the actual the app or anything like that because it's a source here in Iowa. But I will say, just being around a lot of new ideas. I thought Andrew Yang's democracy dollars was something that was something that needed to be talked about and an interesting way to go. I liked Elizabeth Warren talked about, a lot of times we love to talk about term limits, and I'd be for them. But before we get there, we absolutely have to do campaign finance reform, because if we do term limits, then that gives way more power to the lobbyists.
Yeah,
I don't want to be a career politician, and I don't think we should get cycle through things. Absolutely, but at the same time, I do not want the lobbyists to have more power, and so those are some of the few ideas that I think that have been floating around most recently. But I'm open. Like if it's one of those things where like when you come out at this as kind of an outsider and not somebody who has a lot of political history or anything, like I'm flexible. If I hear an idea that I think that would really be beneficial, I join it. But and I'm not like hard headed that like, oh, it's my way or the highway like this. Like when Cory Booker brought up baby bonds, I thought that was a great idea, and things like that. Like we just keep on bringing more people to the table and having more diversity, so you can hear all sorts of things. Because like what we're seeing in the Democratic Party, like there's not enough folks talking about antitrust in agriculture. And like last cycle, I feel like we were the only ones who were doing it. And I believe Mother Jones wrote an article about us, and they referred to us as the only congressional candidate in America talking about the Grain and Inspections Stockyards and Packers Administration or the Stockyards and Packers Act. And just because like this is something that is meaningful to this district. And then I got to convince other people to jump on board with this, because it's one of those things where I'm open to all sorts of ideas.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that, because that's the thing. That's the humility we need in leadership. There are great ideas everywhere. We have to simply believe that we have the best ideas that we've been currently exposed to, and that there are greater ideas out there to be had. I wanted to, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say one other thing that I think we really need to do is get civil engagement on a much larger scale. The fact that there was more people who didn't vote than vote last election just goes to show, or the last presidential election, just goes to show that like we need to get people more engaged. This is something that I feel extremely strongly about, and whether I'm fine if it's a federal holiday, that's fine, and maybe people might go on vacation. But getting them, like what we saw here during the pandemic in the primary in the state of Iowa, everyone got an absentee ballot request form. Yeah. And when I was living in the state of Washington, everyone got a mail-in ballot, and you get to research. So like some of the down ballot races that you don't know about, they have a guy out there who runs as Mr. Space Guy, I think, every year, and like, you know, not to vote for him after you read his crazy platform, but like at least you get to read and understand and have an educated vote, where some of these you're like, I don't know this person.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that frankly doesn't get brought up enough about mail-in voting, is that you get almost extra research opportunity for the common person, because I don't know about you, but if you're a working class person working multiple jobs, you're probably just showing up the day of and saying, okay, it's my civic duty. These are the people who are even engaged enough to vote. They're like, I'm just showing up. I'm usually voting in a row. Usually there are certain lines that are often in many states, and I'm going on my day. There's so many choices out there. But when you have it at home for you to research each of these people, you're going to get a more representative system from that too.
Absolutely. Like there's a popular gas station here that's pretty much everywhere called Casey's, and they have phenomenal pizza. So if you ever come to Iowa, you got to have Casey's pizza. But, I will say that when I stop for gas, I feel every opportunity on the campaign trail is a talkable or learnable situation. And so when I talk with the cash register, I go, are you going to vote in November? And the majority of folks that I talk to, just kind of on a whim, they're like, I mean, maybe, or like, I go, well, do you want to raise? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, I'm trying to fight for raising the minimum wage. Would help you directly. And they're like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, do you have health care, or do you want better health care? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, well, I'm fighting for universal health care, and that would directly impact your life. And I go, you need to vote.
Yeah, it really does come down to the bottom line, how I'm going to help your life. And so I'd love to transition into that kind of strategy portion of, you know, frankly, we have this new race this year. You're not going up against Steve King again. Right. I wanted to understand how you felt about seeing Randy come through, and what are some of your thoughts coming into the fall of like top campaign priorities to make sure voters get to know about you that's a better choice than him?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was an upset, to be honest. We were prepared no matter what. So much of our campaign last cycle and this cycle was, it's not about just being anti-Steve King. It's about saying what you're for and talking about what you're for. And so that really allowed us to really transition very smoothly. And we feel we match up very well against Randy. What we've seen of him, both in the primary and in his 12 years as a state senator, he hasn't turned down any corporate PAC money. Almost 50% of the money he's fundraised came from corporations. And what's funny is, like, I mean, he's a career politician. And what we saw in the primary, he talked about holding the Packers accountable, like in antitrust and stuff. Well, you look at who he took money. He took money from Syngenta and Syngenta is a more of an input side, but he took money from Smithfield. But both Smithfield and Syngenta are both China corporations. And so, like, if you talk about getting tough on China, when you take money from their corporations, that's exactly what politicians do, talk one way to this and accept money from here. And you know what, this district, I think the big difference between Feenstra and King is that, King was notorious for his rhetoric and his controversies and his racism. If you take that aside, which is not easy to do, and I denounce all of that, but if you take that aside, he was his own man. And he was anti-establishment. He was a career politician, but he was anti-establishment. And that's what this district likes. And you look at a generation ago, and you had Berkeley Bedell, who's one of my heroes, who just passed away at 98. He ran, him and Harkin both ran most of this district, about 80% of this district in the 80s. And Berkeley Bedell, his 1982 reelection poster said, the 1% controls our government. Does the 99% have a chance?
Yeah.
And this was in the 80s. And a lot of his rhetoric is still there today. And so, and very useful today. And so you look at this district, this is a very anti-establishment district. And I feel we match up very well. And we did some polling, and it shows this is a neck and neck race.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to focus on one more question before we go into maybe my favorite or two. Maybe we'll go to two fan questions out there. The last thing I wanted to know is, coming from a more rural community, I think this has been an area which has always been contested, either purple or it's been often red. What do you think the Democratic Party in general can be doing better to speak and campaign in rural areas?
Yeah, the first thing, show up. It's that simple. Like I mentioned, we got in my car and went to all 39 counties, and then went to RV and did it again. And like Berkeley Bedell hasn't been a congressman since '87, and I remember showing up in towns, and they said, "You're the first candidate since Burke to come."
Yeah.
and I think that's a huge part of it. But it's also going there and having a message. I think you look at the party, and so much of it, we're becoming more and more urban, more and more coastal. And I think our policies do well in rural America. And you look at, during the midterms, you look at Medicaid expansion in a very red states and districts. You look at Missouri going for raising the minimum wage and workers' rights. And so our policies are doing well in rural areas, but our candidates are not. And so I think it's also, I wouldn't say that Republicans are doing something right that we're not doing wrong. I think things have just kind of shifted in a way, but that just lines up with the Republican Party in these areas. But I encourage everyone, when you go out there and you talk on issues, and you like, okay, you know what? There's national stuff that has nothing to do with this district.
Yeah.
I constantly get talked, like what I see they're hitting me on right now is Nancy Pelosi, and I'm like, Never met her.
Yeah.
I think there was a picture with me and the squad, and it's like, I really don't know. I've never met them.
I'm my own person here. Yeah.
Right. And so when you, but by going out there and going to all 39 counties and getting them to at least say, hey, I'm here, and you show up and you get to meet the person and not the character that they want you to think I am. I think
they know that you're spending your time with them and not those people.
Right.
You know that you're actually listening to their concerns. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, there's no secret sauce or it's not rocket science. It's work your tail off, have a message, and show up.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Well, JD, thank you for answering my questions. Let's turn to maybe a couple of questions that we have here from the audience. Okay. I think this is the first one, and I think this is the most important one. What can we do? This is a person who's in Iowa nearby. What can they do to be able to help out right now? What's the game plan in the days ahead for the campaign that you're looking for assistance on?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for putting our website on the screen down there. And if you go to our website, we have area for volunteers to go. And I got to say, I am so blessed to have a great staff. We have an organizer, Cody, who's a stud. When we got into this pandemic, he right away realized, you know what, we may not be able to physically door knock, but we can digitally door knock. And so he immediately broke our volunteer system into 4 different categories. So there's a technology team, there's a data team, there's an outreach team, and there's a content team. So something kind of for everyone. If you're more outgoing and like to talk with people, the outreach team is great. If you're more artsy and creative, the content team. If you kind of like to be behind the scenes but are willing to do some of the data entry stuff.
Yeah.
And then we also have tech support in different areas of tech. And so we got something for everyone. So that's a huge part. Anytime on social media, you can retweet us or post Facebook posts. And then, but I also like to tell folks that the number one thing you can do is move to the district and vote for me.
Yes, that would be the best way for a national audience to help. But I love the way you had the breakdown there of the actual teams within the organization. Yeah. I think it's really key to foster that culture where it's like you're not getting lost in all the information out there. Give them bite-sized, simple pieces of how they want to help and can use their talents.
And I'll give a lot of credit to the Iowa caucus and the different campaigns. A couple of them campaigns, when they shut down, they open sourced some of their material, and we've been able to use that. And it just, what this allows us, and having it breaking down in this area really allows us to scale up. And so it's been so far it's been phenomenal. And I mean, we are light years ahead of where we were 2 years ago on just the field program alone.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, I want to thank the person here for the question. It's great that you want to know how to help him win, and you're also in Iowa. He also agrees with your pizza choice, though. That's a good recommendation. So let's do one more question here before we wrap up. So this is a pretty simple one. This is a prioritization. What's the first bill you would want to write? Not just like co-sponsor. What do you want to write?
Yeah, so I feel like with the getting the special interests and cleaning up the democracy, I feel there's a lot of people on board with that. So I want to do something very specific for this district, and I want to have the 21st Century Packers and Stockyards Act. And what we've seen, the vertical integration in agriculture and the monopolization of it all has just, I mean, it's sucked the wealth out of rural America. Yeah. And I think that is the first step. That's not going to solve our problems. I'll be very clear about that, but it's the first step in getting us in the right direction. And I feel particularly, so the Packers and Stockyards Act came into play 100 years ago. No, I'm sorry. Next year will be the 100th year anniversary, and that's why I wanted to be to renew it. And modernize it. And the person who sponsored it 100 years ago was a congressman from the very same small town that my grandma grew up in, was a fifth grade elementary teacher for most of her life. And so for me, it would mean a lot to me to do the modern version of it.
I think that's a great idea. And I do think, frankly, in our current climate, agriculture is something I think we can actually get some bipartisan support behind. There had been the whole farm bill that was put through. So I think that's a great way to start breaking some ground.
Exactly. And it's traditionally been bipartisan. And I think the biggest thing, one of the things that I feel that's lacking in DC and lacking in a lot of our politics, is having rural Democrats to balance it out. And that's something I'm extremely passionate about.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, JD, that's all the questions we're going to do from our audience today. I want to thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate finally getting to actually talk the rural economy.
Yeah.
Yes, we have, as you said, who are Democrats and fighting for the progressive cause. They do happen to be on the coast. So it's great to be able to talk from someone in the heartland right now. Is there any final messages you want to put to the people out there to be able to help you out?
I will just want to leave you with this. The best advice I got last cycle, and this can be towards politics, it can be towards anything. And first of all, John, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
The best advice I got last cycle was, if you want change, you have to get uncomfortable. And once you get uncomfortable, you have to get others uncomfortable. And so the success of our campaign last cycle and what we're having now and what will lead till November, it's because a lot of folks in Western Iowa and in North Central Iowa got uncomfortable. And we did things that no one thought we had a chance. And it's amazing what only a small group of people can do. And so don't ever think that you don't make a difference, because you absolutely do. And you never know who you're going to influence as well.
Well, I love the call to action. It is true. You got to just put one foot in front of the other to make change happen. Step up, make the people kind of uncomfortable, start something. That's what we tried to do here. We're building out a network. We're trying to have a little change ourselves, because we know there are people trying to hold us back. There's a little bit of a greed, and we have to fight back against that. And so they're going to have to be uncomfortable along the way as we bring that power back to the people. JD, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciated getting to know you, man.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, have a great rest of your night, man. Okay, guys, that was great getting to talk to JD. I really appreciated him taking the time with us to get to know his campaign and really take us into a perspective that we can start reaching into these rural communities and really revitalizing what is the core of our, system. We need food to survive, and we should be doing this in an eco-sustainably way, helping our environment in a way that helps our labor, and that frankly is just more efficient. It's better to have these localized economies, as you said, getting farm to table. So great getting to talk with him. I want to give a couple plugs out there. Make sure if you like today's video, share this. Help JD out, help us out, help this channel grow so that we can get more people on that you all will want to see. So make sure you share this, like it. It helps the algorithms. Subscribe so that you can always make sure you're here at 9 p.m. Eastern time whenever we record. And let me give you a little bit of a programming update of what we have for the rest of this week. Tomorrow, we're bringing back Full Bloom. Heidi and I will be talking with Jonas Loeb. He's the communications director of the IA-4. We'll be talking unions and how we can be better helping our workforce empowerment that way, as well as how we need to be extending the existing CARES Act. That's going to be running out at the end of this month. So we want to be putting some call to action on our Congress members to start actually getting this extension done. Preferably, we'd hope to get maybe some form of a universal basic income in. We've heard that there's going to be likely maybe one-time checks, as well as even a reduction of unemployment. So we'll have to see there. But then finally, we're going to be wrapping up the week. We're going to be talking with Chris Armitage. He was a congressional candidate in Washington's 6th. And so we want to talk to him about the post-campaign life, some of the lessons from the campaign, and just see how he was doing. He was a pleasure getting to talk to the first time, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him again. Rosebuds, thank you so much for tuning in today. I am very thankful you came to listen to JD. Make sure you share it out there so that he gets his love. I hope you guys are staying loved out there. I hope you guys are taking a moment to get outside and start smelling some of the roses. So stay rosy out there, Rosebuds. you.